Welcome to this afternoon's session. Dare I say, the most interesting and important of the parallel sessions that are operating at this time. My name is John Bramwell. I don't appear in the programme as chair, but I'm delighted and honoured to have the opportunity to chair this session. Dr. Wim De Villiers, who previously was chairing this session, is in fact on our panel, seated at the right-hand side. So now, rather than having to be independent, he can say exactly what he wants to say, and I look forward to hearing that in due course. Before I introduce the speakers and so on, I would like to start with a quotation. And it's a quotation from one of the world's best-known entrepreneurs, Richard Branson, who said, "The quickest way to become a millionaire is to start off a billionaire and run an airline." Which I thought was something to bear in mind as we move on. The second point is that we are going to be using the Spot Me voting app, okay? So we're going to start with that, and if the team could put up the first Spot Me question, I'm going to ask you to respond, if you would, to this question first, and then I'm going to pose another question afterwards. I understand that it's straightforward on the app to choose your vote. It will come up very straightforwardly. Can I ask you, therefore, now to go to your Spot Me app on your device, find the appropriate session Spot Me question, and cast a vote. In this case, you choose either, my goodness me, you choose either government direction is essential in developing entrepreneurship through education, giving vision to those objectives, or government direction is unhelpful. Education should be free to respond to the needs of the community, if you like, without the government giving a focus to that. All right? I will be asking the same question at the end, and I'll be interested to know if anything in the discussions has caused you to change your mind. Has everybody been able to find the question on the app? And can I just ask, has everybody managed to vote? I'll take silence as assent. Thank you very much indeed for that. And can I therefore have the second question? All right. And the second question, I guess, is of particular value to those who are in charge of institutions and so on. Education cannot teach entrepreneurship if it doesn't itself demonstrate that entrepreneurship in its own activities. In other words, you can't teach entrepreneurship unless you're an entrepreneurial through your own activities. Or you may feel it's not necessary. It's perfectly possible to teach entrepreneurship without having to demonstrate it yourself. So if you think that you can only really teach entrepreneurship if you're entrepreneurial, obviously yourself, please answer yes. If you think it's not necessary, it's not essential to be entrepreneurial yourself, you simply have to know what entrepreneurial is all about and focus on the business of education and not on trying to artificially demonstrate entrepreneurship, then you should vote no. Okay, has everybody managed to find the question? And has everybody managed now to vote? Ah. I wasn't aware there would be a little bit of tinkling music while that was going on. That's delightful. I assume that now means that the voting on that particular question is closed, which gives me now the opportunity to introduce our distinguished panel. People always say distinguished panel, but in this case I'm delighted that it really is a distinguished panel, and I'm very, very pleased indeed to welcome the assembled panel here to discuss the issue of entrepreneurship and higher education institutions for us for the next about an hour or so. First of all, I'd like to say thank you and welcome to Her Excellency Tan Sri Dr. Nurul Aina Mohammed Noor, who is the Secretary General for the Ministry of Higher Education in Malaysia. Dr. Noor is the Secretary General, as I said, since August 2016, and prior to that, she was the Secretary General of the Ministry of Science, Technology and Innovation in Malaysia, and the Ministry of Women, Family and Community Development Malaysia. And I have to say, beyond my notes here, if you check on the internet, you'll find a wealth of activities that Dr. Noor has been involved in, promoting the cause of equality for women and the better representation of women's views worldwide. She obtained her PhD in political science at the City University of New York and a Master of Social Science from the University of Birmingham in the United Kingdom. She was a recipient of the Goldman Sachs Visiting Research Fellow at the University of Oxford in 2002, and there's a huge further element of biography which I won't have time to go into, otherwise we're going to run out of. I hope you'll forgive me, Your Excellency, if I cut it fairly short at that point, but I would invite you to check her further biography if you would yourself. Our second speaker will be Dr. Wim De Villiers, who is the Rector and Vice-Chancellor of Stellenbosch University in South Africa. Wim De Villiers is the Rector of the university, has a long history of working in higher education as a top-level administrator, having been the Dean of Faculty of Health Sciences at UCT, Chief Administrative Officer at the University of Kentucky College of Medicine, and the Chief of Division of Gastroenterology at the University of Kentucky. He is skilled in healthcare consulting, clinical research, medical education, and life sciences, and he is a strong education professional, MHCM focused in healthcare and healthcare administration management from Harvard University School of Public Health. He's a board-certified gastroenterologist with a PhD in macrophage immunology, I hope I pronounced that correctly, from Oxford University, and his clinical and research expertise is in inflammatory bowel disease. So if this evening's reception food has anything to answer for, you know where to go for help. Finally, I would like to say welcome to Professor Dr. Chine Bowden, who is the Professor of Industrial Engineering at the National School of Engineers of Tunis in Tunisia. Chine Bowden is Professor at that School of Engineers. He's a specialist in the field of solar energy and energy conservation in buildings. He is a senior member of the research laboratory Materials, Optimization, Energy for Sustainability. He's authored more than 20 publications in international peer-reviewed journals, and I believe that he acted as consultant to the Secretary of State's office and is a fellow of the International Solar Energy Society in Germany and of the same society in Sweden. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming the panel. Thank you. That's enough from me. I'll give you a chance to listen to the important people who are here on the panel. And first of all, I would like to invite Her Excellency to stand and present to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor De Villiers. I hope I pronounce it right. Is that right? Sorry? All right. Thank you. My presentation today is on promoting and embedding entrepreneurship in Malaysia. So basically, it's a case study. And, okay, next, please. Okay, before that, I would like to welcome all to beautiful Malaysia. It's full of sun, beaches, so please enjoy yourself after this, after my presentation. No, after his presentation. Okay, the content today is introduction, Malaysia's aspirations, entrepreneurship in nation building, entrepreneurship in higher education, and government initiatives. So this is the content of my presentation today. Well, where is Malaysia? Where Malaysia wants to be? Actually, our present Prime Minister, Najib Razak, he came into power as the Prime Minister in year 2009. And he introduced new economic model. So the elements of the new economic model says that one is that we need to have high income, inclusiveness, sustainability, which at the end of the day will result into quality of life. And also, basically, when you talk about new economic model, we have these characteristics of Malaysia's economy: market-led, well-governed, regionally integrated, entrepreneurial, and innovative. So check it out on entrepreneurial activity, because Malaysia, we are highly aggressive when it comes to entrepreneurial activities, and also promoting entrepreneurship among not only our population, but also Ministry of Higher Education through our universities. And also, we envision to become a top 20 nation economic development, social advancement, and innovation by 2050. So that is a policy by itself. We call it Transformasi Nasional 2050, National Transformation Policy 2050. In other words, we are saying that by 2050, we are going to be a top 20 nation. And this is actually an initiative with regard to bottom-up approach, and the plan for the future of Malaysia for a 30-year period from 2020 to 2050. So that's actually the big agenda. We're setting our agenda for the 2050, and this is where we are bringing all the young people of the nation to come along and discuss, and we have town hall discussions and engagements with the young people to ensure that we can reach the objective by 2050. Okay, on entrepreneurship. That's a key element for Malaysia's nation building. As being mentioned just now, one of the characteristics of nation building in Malaysia. And government is very supportive when it comes to entrepreneurship. And this is where, for example, in the case of budget allocation, in 2017, 2.6 billion was allocated. That was last year. But as of this year, we have allocated 14.6 billion via the budget announcement recently for entrepreneurship per se. And in this regard too, we look at entrepreneurship as economic growth for the nation. First, economic growth, to ensure there's economic growth, to ensure that there's employment. And second is to create or establish innovative society. And this is where innovation will play a huge role in the context of entrepreneurship. And also, we want to have creativity among not only our students, but also the population as a whole, even school children, to have creative ideas and creative thinking. And last but not least, competitiveness in terms of making Malaysia to be the top 20 nation in 2050. So basically, these are the areas that we are focusing on with regard to entrepreneurship. And also, the government is supportive to the entities. Allocations are also given to entities that are linked or have collaborated with entrepreneurship. For example, SMEs, entities or organization, ministries dealing with entrepreneurship, and also linking that to agriculture, R&D, and industry. So industry players are also involved in this entrepreneurship program. When you look at this, actually, the government is setting up or establishing an ecosystem, a culture and ecosystem for the future graduates to ensure that they can penetrate into the future ecosystem that has already been established by the government via all being mentioned just now. So what kind of infrastructure? For example, business space, incubators, digital platform, and RTC. RTC is a new phenomenon in Malaysia. It's called Rural Transformation Center, whereby it's a one-stop center. You can have everything, licensing, and you can borrow money, and you can do everything with regard to entrepreneurship at this so-called center. And we have another one, you call it UTC, Urban Transformation Center. That's a new phenomenon in the case of Malaysia. Now, having said that too, the government support initiatives to ensure building programs for SMEs and budding entrepreneurs, advisory, training services, and business in transformation program, dedicated funding and support for young or youth entrepreneurs, women entrepreneurs, and rural community. The beautiful part about it is that women entrepreneurs are involved. Women, yeah, women. So, women is crucial in the context of entrepreneurship in Malaysia. There are many NGOs and also associations that are dealing with women entrepreneurs. And also they are given allocation by the government to ensure that they can have activities, programs, and also for them to create awareness about entrepreneurship among the women in Malaysia. So that's a big plus point for Malaysia. And next is entrepreneurship in education. Well, this is where I come into picture. It was launched in 2015, whereby the Malaysia Education Blueprint states that in its shift one, number one shift, holistic, entrepreneurial, and balanced graduates. So if you were to see, entrepreneurship is actually embedded in the Malaysia Education Blueprint of Malaysia. That is in itself a national policy in the case of Malaysia. And the government recognizes the importance of entrepreneurship to be embedded and cultured into the universities and also polytechnics and the community colleges. And again, if you were to look here, the main aim is for us to change the mindset of our students, for them to become job creators and not job seekers. They create jobs. They become entrepreneurs, they create jobs for others and not job seekers. And this is one of the reasons why unemployment is great, and we have tweaked our policy to ensure that our students, they are exposed and their thinking is different to the rest. Next is education in entrepreneurship in education. As shown here, that entrepreneurship development policy for Malaysia in higher education in 2010, and followed by 2 entrepreneurship strategic action plans. And the targets are, we have targets. We have targets for entrepreneurship here. For example, 100% initiative 1, 100% of university students will be exposed to entrepreneurship culture and attributes. That's the target by 2020, 100%. And then 10%, initiative 2, yeah? The target, 10% of graduating students opting for entrepreneurship as a career of choice. So at the end of the day, when they graduate from the universities, they 10% will become entrepreneurs. That's our not only target, our KPIs. And then followed by 15% of our students involving in entrepreneurship activities during the studies. So when they are involved in entrepreneurship activities, it means when they are still students, their companies are being registered for free at the registration organization of Malaysia, and that is sponsored by the government. So 15% of our students are already entrepreneurs and they have their own companies whilst they are studying. And finally, 1,500 educators possess expertise in entrepreneurship. This is via training too, and also creating awareness in campus. Now, when you talk about embedding entrepreneurship, we have a new entrepreneurship module as a compulsory subject. It is compulsory in all public universities to have students to register in entrepreneurship module. For example, it says here that 40% theory plus 60% practical. They have 2 to 3 hours, 2 or 3 credit hours. And this is the book. Do you have the book there on the table? So this is Introduction to Entrepreneurship, and here we have all the details about what entrepreneurship in the university. I have it here. My colleagues can give it to you later, yeah? And this is where that we follow by this book. And this book was recently published last year. It was published last year to ensure that all students, it's compulsory for them to take 2 to 3 credit hours. That is in their first year. And also, that is also the credit hours, embedding entrepreneurship. When you talk about, now the next one is on Leo, entrepreneurship. Just 1 second. Okay, when you talk about entrepreneurship here, it says that entrepreneurship, they are given credit hours. So they are involved in entrepreneurship at the same time they get credit hours for their involvement in entrepreneurship. So that will be counted in their ICGPA. And back to here, integrated cumulative grade point average. In the case of Malaysia, for example, I was educated in the US. So basically you talk about CGPA. Yeah? That is basically about knowledge. But what we are trying to say here is we are talking about experiential learning. And this is where entrepreneurship comes into picture. And it's called integrated cumulative grade point average. And evaluation of students are based from their involvement in entrepreneurship, volunteerism, among others. Yeah? And next is when you talk about entrepreneurship too, that's how serious we are about entrepreneurship. We are even creating gap year, and the students, they can do entrepreneurship during the gap year period. So it's a gap year for them. They can travel, they can work, they can learn, they can volunteer, and as well, they can have their entrepreneurship program or event for them. Next is when you talk about 2U to I. as being mentioned just now during my presentation earlier on stage, 2U2I is 2 years university and 2 years in industry. We are talking about giving students knowledge plus practical skills. Knowledge is 2 years in university. Practical skills is 2 years in industry. The attachment for 2 years. And we are talking about learn and earn. What is learn and earn? Learn is they learn and at the same time they earn because they are having attachment to companies and the companies are paying them for their job. So it's learn and earn too. So as being mentioned here just now, go back to the earlier. For example, in UPM, University Pertanian Malaysia, UPM, year 1 and 2, they are in university, but year 3 and 4, they are in industry and they are working on agriculture. In other words, they are attached to agriculture companies or even on the ground. And the next one is University Malaysia Kelantan, year 1 and 3, they will be in university, year 2 and 4, they will be attached to industry and so forth. And also, next please. When you talk about entrepreneurship initiatives, we are going big. We are going big in the sense that we look at global collaboration is a must. This is where, for example, we are having, we already have our MOU with Alibaba Business School, and this is where we send our students. We send our students to Alibaba, and they are attached to Alibaba Business School in Hangzhou, China. And I was there too with the Vice President of Alibaba, Brian Wong. When they are attached there for 2 weeks, they learn about Alibaba and e-commerce. I think you're all very much aware that Alibaba is the biggest e-commerce in the world. And we want to get the best from the knowledge of Alibaba to be transferred to our students. We send them there, and they can even go into Alibaba platform. And 2 weeks ago, I met one of the students, and actually he has utilized the platform, and he is getting 30,000 ringgit per month because of this Alibaba connection. That's a plus point. And he has yet to finish his study, but he said that he wants to finish his study and also at the same time earn the money. Okay, next please. And you talk about social innovation. Social innovation is whereby we have our students involved in social innovation and social enterprise. And by doing so, actually, we are creating students to ensure that they have this creative thinking and innovative thinking. This is where 4th Industrial Revolution comes into picture. Because 4th Industrial Revolution states that basically for one to survive in future is that you must have innovative and creative thinking. And this is where we are trying to nurture or rather tweak the thinking of the students to ensure that they can embed that kind of elements into their thinking. Next is commercialization. Oh, sorry for the spelling. It should be C. Commercialization is whereby every month we have exposure for the students. We will rent a place in a mall, and the students, as you can see here, they will display their products. And even they give services, for example, facial, hair cutting, and even massage. This is for the TVET players. So every month, we will rent a place. We meaning to say that the government will rent a place, and they will come, all the students, and sell their products at the malls. Next, please. And we have every year a special month, we call it Entrepreneurship Month, that is in October, every year in October. And this is again, we have all our students in Malaysia converge in one place, and we have that they can display their products as well as change ideas, and also for them to share their experiences with regard to entrepreneurship. Next. Mohe Entrepreneurial Awards, this is the highlight of the year. Mohe Entrepreneurial Awards is whereby we would call all the students that have been doing entrepreneurship, and we will assess them. And assessment of these students, actually we have international assessors, and they will look into this for about 1 month. They will assess, and finally they will give the results, and we have the Entrepreneurial Awards at the end of the year. Now, when you talk about student achievement and exposure of entrepreneurship, for example, I did mention just now that in 2012, it was student exposure 20%, but now due to our aggressive efforts to ensure that they are They know what it is all about, and also by the fact that we make it compulsory for them to have to take 2 to 3 credit hours. So now, as of last year, our assessment was that 75% of the students, they know what entrepreneurship is all about. And also, as I think you're very much aware, I'm not too sure you're very much aware, but we have students here, our local students, 650,000 students. That is not actually 1.2 million plus the international students. But our students, we have 650,000 students. So when 5% of the students are involved in entrepreneurship, for example, actually 33,000 students are actually involved in entrepreneurship during their university days. And they have their business registered at the Malaysian registration of companies. And registration fee is actually waived by the government to ensure that they got it for free. Now, upon graduation, upon graduation, for example, we have 3% of our students last year having business while they are still when they have graduated. So, in other words, that there's a leap of 1% to 3% of our students who are involved in who are not involved, who have already committed themselves into entrepreneurship and also become job creators. So basically, this is my presentation about what entrepreneurship is all about with regard to Ministry of Higher Education. And terima kasih.
Excellent. A lot. I was busy writing down as many notes as I could. I'm sure a lot of you are doing the same. A massive injection of energy, not just of money, but a significant amount of funds and energy into the process. Initiatives for women, job creations, a whole series of things, a series of different initiatives all coming together aimed around particular KPIs for the country. I will invite questions when all of our panel members have had a chance to speak. So please, if you have queries and questions for the Secretary of State, write them down, and I'll be ready to invite you to ask those questions at the end of the session of presentations. I'd now like to invite Dr. Wim De Villiers to speak. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. It's a pleasure to be here. It'll teach me to volunteer to, I initially was scheduled to be the chair of the session and not do much as what John's doing now, and suddenly I'd have to do a lot. Secondly, I want to commend the Secretary General on her excellent presentation also at the plenary session when she really gave the national perspective on what entrepreneurship is, and also on this very ambitious vision what Malaysia wants to achieve with higher education in the next 10 years, redesigning higher education, and I think the blueprint that you see in your packet is certainly excellent. Can I have the presentation, please? Okay, so the Secretary General provided a national perspective, so I'm going to be much more local and talk about some South African perspectives, but also specifically Stellenbosch University, of which I am the Vice Chancellor. And with regard to, I'll give you our approach at the university that we've attempted to embed entrepreneurship. I'll give you some data on whether it has been successful or what the reality is. And then the third question, how do government interventions help or not help? And I think the short answer is, I will argue, not initially, but maybe later on. It adds to that somewhat. So this is, and I'll give you a case study in various different ways. So this is Stellenbosch University in the Western Cape, South Africa. It's a university that has more than 30,000 students. It's a research-intensive university in South Africa, one of about 5 or so in the country as a whole. And it's a third of the students are postgraduate, with a sizable international component of about 14 to 15%. Can I advance it, please? So the university, in a sense, you can also I'm going to talk a little bit about entrepreneurship in the traditional sense, but also entrepreneurship in a different sense. In an earlier presentation, Professor De La Rey, in her plenary discussion, talked quite a bit about a social aspect to and social innovation, transformation, etc. that's required, and we have to re-look at international rankings. And I also want to make a case for social entrepreneurship. And a role that Stellenbosch University play, I would like to detail as entrepreneurship in the education mode. So we provide a significant doctorates. Last year we had, in the 2017 academic year, a record of 305 PhDs. We have a very active business school, and we have currently about 357 postdocs that we employ at the university. So there's a significant investment in knowledge generation. Next slide. So these are all the characteristics of great universities. Please continue advancing. So we all want to be engaged, again, just continue. Engage in research programs, and we want to have our graduates that are employed, continue. We want to have our graduates develop attributes that make them very employable and successful, but very important, comes back to this point of mine of social impact and social entrepreneurship. Next slide. So, but this really means that we need to change the way we think of the traditional role of universities, in that we, advance please, that it's not just confined to teaching and research, but also innovation. And this is where the question of how do we use the knowledge that we generate, how do we use the publications, and how do we use the intellectual property that we generate? And there's the Secretary General also referred to commercialization of that. Next slide. But the important element there is on the right, is the creation of what I would call a knowledge region. And that is really what Stellenbosch University has tried to develop over the last number of years. And so I gave you the overall picture of the local picture of the university as an educational entrepreneurial. Technology is hamstring. Of the university as a place where we advance educational entrepreneurship. But more than that, we also, in where we want to do develop a knowledge region, is so on a more okay, we have an issue, John. Okay. I think that's a very good idea. So my theme is that of creating knowledge regions in Africa. So what have we managed to do over the last number of years? And why is Africa so important? Firstly, what we're trying to achieve there is if we are here in Malaysia and Southeast Asia, but Africa actually has 15% of the world's population. It's the second most populated continent, but also a very young population. 60% of the population younger than 25 years. And I think that's also where this whole issue of entrepreneurship really comes to the fore, in that we need to create job creators and not job seekers. So a case study that we were involved in the Stellenbosch University is called Innovus. So that is where spin-off companies in the traditional sense would be developed. And in that way, if you think of spin-off companies in the traditional sense, Stellenbosch University has actually been quite successful in this regard, in that we have the most patents over the last number of years since 2009. It's the next slide, if we get there. But so we have the most patents in the country as a whole of any institution, even more than the CSIR or Sasol, which is a prominent private company. So it's a question of how do you capitalize this? And there's, of course, a traditional model of spinning out companies and getting venture capitalists and angel investors. And so, yes, it can be seen as an additional revenue stream for a university, but I think we have to be very careful about that. It's a very small percentage of these spin-off companies that are actually that become what we call in the University of Florida in Gainesville, which is the Gatorade, which still makes them about $100 million a year. That happens very rarely. So it's more of embedding the notion of entrepreneurship. So what are the things that we're involved in? We're involved with healthcare, food security, energy and water savings, and renewable energy. But the important thing is, so that's Innova, so that's the overall type business, the commercial property, the tech transfer part of it. But what we actually did, and I think quite successfully, and that's where it comes to, does it actually work in practice for where we have this little micro laboratory in the Western Cape, is that we established a launch lab. So Launch Lab is an innovation hub, a campus-based business incubator for these startup companies. There are three types of these companies. It's university companies, it's student ventures, and then also startups that come from outside the university. We're in the Western Cape, we're three other higher education institutions, the University of the Western Cape, University of Cape Town, and the Cape Peninsula University of Technology, and they all make use of this space, and where we really we share this space, the like-minded people, there are training programs that are put on, mentoring and coaching. We assist them to find investors, and we help them build business models, and then they either sink or swim. After 18 months, 2 years, we kick them out. Either they make it or they don't make it. So it is a bloody world out there. So the things that we're involved with is fintech, payments and big data, the paid media, clean tech, agri-tech, and also education. And I think I showed you some detail on the education part. So there's a whole process of they apply to get into this launch lab. There's technology transfer, ideas pitching platform, and then monthly, quarterly, semi-annually, and annually, the various programs that they go through. But the important slide is yes, it has certainly contributed somewhat to the university bottom line, but that's not the issue. And I want to come back to this, maybe the most important takeaway, really, from what I think that we've managed to achieve is this aspect of going towards a knowledge region in the Western Cape. And that is through this launch lab, we've widened access to and support for entrepreneurs significantly, and we've really broken down these barriers. And also we've worked successfully with other partners in higher education. So that what this has actually resulted in over from 2012 is that traditionally the most venture capital deals and startup numbers occurred in the northern part of the country near Johannesburg. And what we've actually seen now is that this has changed to the Western Cape. Is now actually the region where most venture capital deals occur. It's about so there was a swing from about 20% to 75%. So I think that's been the most significant. So if you ask me, in reality, yes, I think it's achieved what we wanted to, and it's becoming very successful. There's a good link also with a technology park outside the town. We're getting more sponsorship for this, and now government is interested. All right. So that is also the point that I wanted to make. In our specific case, government was not really very helpful or useful at the start. It was the private sector that provided the seed funding for this. The other important point that I also want to make, this is a very traditional way of tech transfer, spin-off companies, etc. But as the Secretary General also alluded to, and as Professor De La Rey also alluded to, is social entrepreneurship, social innovation is very important, and many more of our students are actually involved in that as student involvement in community and in basic education, etc. So we shouldn't have just a very narrow definition of entrepreneurship, but we're certainly attempting to embed this in our university culture. So thank you very much.
Well, a clear demonstration there that vice-chancellors can be entrepreneurial and flexible when things break down. And hats off to our entrepreneurs over the far side who generated the slides eventually. But there's some key points. Apart from the wonderful quote, "It's a bloody world out there," which I shall use, I think, a number of times. The Vice-Chancellor did give us the perspective of an individual institution about building intellectual capital and about how to utilise that capital once you've created it. And I think that's a very important message alongside all the other points that you raised. So I'm delighted now to introduce our last speaker, Professor Bowden, and thank you. Can you come to the stage? Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to make this presentation. Her Excellency talked about a global experience in the whole country. The Vice-Chancellor talked about experience of a university, and I'm going to a micro experience of my engineering school. So, okay. Can we go? Yes. So in Tunisia, education is one of the pillars of the development, and it was a strategic choice since the independence of the country. So everybody was in school, mainly those kids at the age of 5 to 6, 99% are in school. Primary, I mean, kids at the level of the primary schools are at 99% enrolled in schools. And then in the global, we have most of people enrolled in education and in schools. And at university level, the guys at the age of 19 to 23 years old, 32% are enrolled at the university. Which is amazing is that 63% among them are girls. And in Tunisia, girls are really enrolled in all specialties, even in engineering. In engineering school, we have 60% women. The global budget of the education is about 4.5% to 5% of the global budget of the country, and it is about 1.5% of the national GDP. So we have a high enrollment at the university, but the last years we have some problems and issues related to the employment of students and the graduates. So now we have an unemployment rate which is around 35 to 38%. And among women, and then something like 20% among boys. And so altogether it's around 28% of unemployment. Unemployment means people seeking a job for more than 2 years. which is a serious issue now. If you look at the employment of the university graduates, so we find that 6 months after graduation, we have an average rate of employment which is around 30% only. And this depends upon the universities. So for younger universities, it's very low. It's around 10%. And then it can go to nearly 40% for the most experienced and old universities. This employment rate is also a function of the fields of specialty of the students. So we find that we have a high rate of employment for medical schools, for example, or for engineering or for educational science, but very low employment for different other disciplines. So you have the red lines are mainly for the bachelor degrees, which are fundamental bachelor degrees, in which students are not having real qualification which allow them to go for the job market. And so they have to either continue their studies by performing a specialized master degree or professional master degree, or then switch to some other specialties which are having higher rate of employment. So now coming to the to our school. In our school, we were on the reform of our educational programs, and of course we would like to have some educational programs which are conform to the international standards. And if we look to the international standards and basic competencies which are needed for engineering schools, we can find that most of these competencies are related to entrepreneurial spirit and entrepreneurship. Of course, you will find the basic knowledge in the field of studies and so on, but you will find also some capacity for generating ideas, oral and written communication, capacity to learn, and so on. Please. And so all these capacity or competencies which are written in red are mainly related to entrepreneurial spirit and entrepreneurship. So in the school, we dedicated in the beginning a program, a master program, a professional master program, which is dedicated to innovation and entrepreneurship. And then we started to introduce entrepreneurial or entrepreneurship courses for all students. And in the beginning, we were really very careful about the selection of professors and the selection of the programs. The most experienced professors are giving this course. But after 2-3 years, this course became a kind of very boring course, and nobody would like to attend it because it's just a course for how to create a business and how to create a company. And so we switched it since now 6 years to another approach, because giving entrepreneurial course has to be done by people who are really experienced and coming from the field. And so we have professors, of course, and which are interfering in these courses and which are responsible, but the major professors or major trainers are coaches coming from companies. And then the students are split in small groups of 5 to 6 students, and every group is creating his own company. And so they are supposed to raise funds from their own budget, own money, or from family or friends. They create, no, back, please. Back, please. So they raise the fund, they create the company, they offer the service. Of course, these are very small companies. They are offering some services as making printing on mugs or having some hats or something like that, which is very easy. And so they are supposed to fill all the documentation which is related to the creation of a company, and then they have to produce the good and then to sell it. And then later on, they make the accountability of the company, and then they share the benefits, and they even go to the to closing the company. And so they have the whole life cycle of the company, and they go through all the procedure and all the paperwork which is related to a company creation. And then since we switched to this model, this course became the most popular course in the school. All students are very enthusiastic to do some very good job. And at the end of the year, we have also a kind of competition, which is the best company in terms of management, in terms of making the business. So this was the main change that we introduced to this course. And of course, we introduced many other activities, which are innovation workshop and innovation week, 48 hours for innovation. This is a seminar that we introduced at the beginning of the first year at the school. So the students, they start with an introductory week. And during this introductory week, they are introduced to the different activities of the school, different different services of the school, and they have this 48 hours of innovation. This is just to challenge them and then to make them, to prepare them to this spirit. We have also many workshops and events, and recently we have created the Career Center. And then we push now the students to have extracurricular activity, which are club activities. Some of them are related to entrepreneurship, and we introduced in the as a condition for the graduation of the students that every student has to make 2 semesters of extracurricular activity. So if he doesn't make this, then he cannot have his graduation. And so this is a real condition for the graduation. Yes, please. So these are some of the challenges in which the students participate. They have the Innovation Week. They have some robotics competition for robots. They participate to the Eco Marathon of Shell every year, and they are classified, having a very good classification. They have the Innovation Week, please. They have the Fab Lab and then the innovation activities. And so now, this was the experience of the school, but now this experience is extrapolated for the different other universities and institutions. The ministry has adopted some, some measures to encourage the entrepreneurship among universities. And so we have an educator training program for entrepreneurship, but also for soft skills and languages. The ministry organized an entrepreneurial competition once a year. We encourage also the social entrepreneurship program, which is led by the Enactus program. We have an association which is INJES, which is empowering entrepreneurship among students. And the university has created, the ministry has created the career centers now. Now we have more than 50 career centers in different institutions of higher education. And we have some other leadership and exchange programs which are organized now by the ministry to push students for entrepreneurship. Thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. We've had, hi there, thank you. Excellent, we've had some extremely interesting presentations. In particular, from our final speaker, the idea of drawing this from the bottom up, from the department, back up through to the ministry, and doing it that way. We've had a debate from the ministry downwards, pushing a particular series of agendas and initiatives through the ministry into the education system. And we've seen it come from the other end, which is from the institution side, saying from a perspective which is based on building knowledge capital, how we can move from that knowledge capital into an entrepreneurial environment. And now it's the chance for you, as part of the audience, to be able to ask your questions of this panel. And so I'd like to invite you, by raising your hand if you would, any questions from the audience at this point. There's a gentleman in the middle row, table 6 at the back, and then I'll come to table 3. Yeah. There's a microphone there, thank you.
Myself, Ramchandran from India, Vice Chancellor, Sandip University. To all the panelists, how you motivate students in terms of claiming their IPR? Suppose if they come with a good idea, good product, how universities are helping them in registering and managing the IPR, intellectual property rights?
Thank you. Managing the IP. Minister, or Secretary of State, I should say, how do you motivate the students to develop their IP.
You're talking about intellectual property, right? Yes. IPR? Okay. In the case of Malaysia, for example, we set some allocation for IP for the students. And normally students that are in campus, they are not doing anything about the IPs, but basically it's for them to gain experiences so that they are involved in entrepreneurship. But when you talk about commercialization, that will be a different story. Commercialization is whereby we are looking at not students, but the researchers themselves. That's two different stories here. And researchers, yeah, we do encourage them to have IPs where allocations are given to them. In other words, they will have to fork out some allocation, and the ministry or the university will have to fork out some allocation. And this is where, for example, that we give talks and also to ensure that whether it is necessary for the respective commercialized products to be IP'd or otherwise. Because it will entail a lot of spending, because you have to renew the IP in future, for example. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Dr. Bowden, have you a view on, I mean, you're talking about students generating their own activities. They can win sort of competitions and so on. How do they work on the IP?
Yeah. They do have some few hours of training on the concept of intellectual property within the course of entrepreneurship. And then we have the technology transfer centers at the university, and we have also a national agency, which is an agency for the promotion of innovation, which is leading these centers of transfer of technology. And so we train the students on the concept, because most of the students also have to work for their graduation work. I mean, more than 99% of the students do their graduation work in company, and so they are supposed to have concepts of intellectual property and then professional secret and so on. And so they are trained on that. And so if they develop new ideas, or if they are innovative or in the process of creation of a new concept, then the Center of Transfer of Technology takes them and supports them to develop their license. Yeah. Okay,
thank you. And obviously, Professor De Villiers, your university is in a very entrepreneurial area. You know, there's a great deal of competition out there. How do you help students understand their issues around IP?
Yeah, I think in short, two points. Any conversation with a vice chancellor eventually boils down to money. So this conversation is also about money. And certainly if students and or academic staff, if they use the university's facility to develop that intellectual property, there will be a percentage of that would be due to the university. So it is certainly in the institution's interest to look after that. Having said that, and I did mention that Stellenbosch University has a very high number of patents, but as the Secretary General also said, it's expensive to keep these patents going. And so there's an increasing tendency in North America as well, is that this emphasis on IP, one should perhaps move away from that and rather get the company going, because it's so these tech transfer offices can be extremely expensive, and one has to be very selective about which ones you really go for.
Thank you. Thank you very much. There's a question on table 3, and then I'll come to table 5 after that.
You've all been very busy. My name's Louise Ringe. I'm Louise Nicol. I'm part of the Asia Careers Group. I'm a female startup, and I'm an SDM Bahad. So I'm a UK national who started a company in Malaysia. I wanted to ask what companies can do. So as an entrepreneur myself, the opportunity to mentor and to get involved in some of these training programs I think is really critical. So as you said, when professors teach entrepreneurship courses, it's not necessarily as people on the coal face. So I'd be really interested to know how more companies can get involved from a personal point of view, and what you're doing to engage companies in your entrepreneurial outreach with students.
Thank you. Perhaps I'll go to the Secretary General first.
You are based in Malaysia?
Yes.
Sorry, I don't get your name.
Louise.
Louise? I think you're very much aware about Magic, right? Yeah. So Magic is an organization, and whereby it deals with working with universities. For example, we have an MOU with Magic. For example, they come to our universities and they teach our students about entrepreneurship and how to go about doing it. For example, and you have heard about Global Economic Community, right? GEM, Global Economic Entrepreneurship Movement. That Cradle. So these are all the ecosystems being set up by the government to ensure that our university students, they are linked to these respective entities. So since you are very much aware about the situation in Malaysia, I guess you know that universities, we are working with all these organizations, Magic, Cradle, Global Entrepreneurship Movement, and SMEs and the rest. So that is where I believe that the government of Malaysia, the pushing of an agenda of entrepreneurship is already in the national policy. And at the same time, the ecosystem has been established to ensure that the others link to the respective entities for them to utilize the infrastructure, the basic infrastructure, and the rest.
Thank you. Professor Bowden, you were mentioning before that in your country, unemployment is very high. So the connection with industry, I guess, becomes particularly important. How would you respond to that point?
Yeah. It depends upon universities. Speaking about engineering schools, the connection with enterprises are very good, and our students are supposed to have at least 1 to 2 months training every year during summer holidays. But also they are supposed to have their the graduation diploma inside the company. And so we are also very, active in terms of having people from industry coming and giving classes or giving lectures. And this course of entrepreneurship is given by coaches coming from companies. So we have these habits in engineering schools, and truly the unemployment rate is not in engineering schools, but it is in different other faculties. And so the global issue is to how to make that some specific faculties come and get closer to the companies. This is really an issue mainly for some specialties like history or geography or all those fundamentals specialities.
Yeah, I understand. Well, perhaps as Vice Chancellor at Stellenbosch, you've faced that particular problem as well as the issue of generally getting companies to engage with your university in a country which has some very well-established universities that they could choose to engage with. How have you solved that problem?
Yeah, I think I was just looking at the data. So our tech transfer entity is Innovus, and that actually owns the Launch Lab or the Innovation Hub. And that has opened in August 2013, so it's a little bit less than 5 years now. Up to date, it has supported 123 companies, so ventures. And that has resulted in quite significant job creation. But how to really effect this in reality? And there, I think, if I reflect on it, we've been very aggressive about making use of our alumni network. So successful alumni that have started businesses or involved in the private sector, in getting them in to give talks at the Launch Lab, to be involved as mentors, to help in also as business mixers. And that has actually resulted in that final statistic that I talked about, where we're now seeing this nascent knowledge region developing, where venture capital is now starting to come into the system.
Good. Thank you very much. We had a question from table 5, and I'll have to close it after that question. I apologise, but you'll have a chance to speak to the colleagues after the session.
Hi, thanks. My name's Jo. I work internationally with leadership and knowledge exchange. One of the barriers we've seen in several countries has been around the reward and recognition of academics for engaging in knowledge exchange entrepreneurship. How have you managed to motivate people? Have you managed to change the tenure track system to recognise entrepreneurial work or to reward educators of enterprise?
Good. Well, thank you for that. Perhaps I will, as I've been tending to do, turn to the Secretary General first. Secretary General, you talked about involving students and developing students, but of course we're now looking at the academic staff and the professors and so on. What kind of systems within your initiative do you think will reward the strong professors and teachers for getting involved in entrepreneurship?
Thank you for the question. In the case of Malaysia, for example, we have entrepreneurship centers in all universities, plus community colleges and also polytechnics. So in other words, these centers are headed by someone chosen by the respective VCs or the director of polytechnics. So in other words, we are saying that it's a job, how to say it, upgrading of jobs by the respective officers, lecturers, so that they can head the organization, the centers. And also by the fact that you must remember that how do you entice them is that also we have training for them. For example, we bring in China, I mentioned about Alibaba's now, they are part and parcel of the training process with regard to entrepreneurship too. And that will boost their morale by the fact that they are being trained by the best in the world with regard to e-commerce. And national policy is a must. So in other words, they have to abide by the national policy, and it's a goal for all of them. Thank you.
Thank you. Professor Bowden, you mentioned that you've already got companies involved, and the students are getting a very rich experience involving the countries. How are the academic staff engaging with that, and how would you reward, if you like, their engagement and success with entrepreneurship?
Yeah. The Tunisian regulation authorizes academics to create their own company within the incubator of the university. And then, till now, the number of professors who have created the company is not that big because the concept is rather new. And the second point is about IP. If a professor has a patent, and then he has the privilege to use this patent during the first year. If he do not use it during the first year, then the university can take the patent and exploit it later on. So this is about business creation and patenting, but we do have also a lot of training activities for professors in terms of entrepreneurship. And then if they create their company, then within the incubator, then they have also some incentives for their promotion, because in the promotion we take in consideration, of course, the publication, but also the patents and the creation of activity.
Well, thank you very much. And I see that you're nodding to a number of those points. Perhaps you could elaborate a little.
Yeah, I think it's very much the same in our system. We don't have a tenure track system as in the US. But these efforts at entrepreneurialism would certainly be taken into account for promotion purposes, and then there are very much financial incentives above and beyond the usual university position would also be an incentive.
Good. Well, thank you for that, and thank you for the questions so far. I know there are others wishing to ask questions, but we are short of time, as we always are in these sessions, giving our speakers a chance to present to us in an uninterrupted and sensible way, and then to answer some of the questions has posed some of those further issues for you. And I think that some of our colleagues will be around at the reception later on this evening and perhaps able to answer any further questions for you that you might have. But I do want to go back, just before we close, to the spot me questions that we had before, because we did put those up. And I wonder if you could have a review, as it were, and ask those questions again. Now you've listened to the debate, you've had a chance to focus on those issues for this period of time. The first question was about government direction being essential, and we've heard different perspectives of that in the presentations. So can I invite you to find that application and to vote on that question again? Thank you. slightly scary watching that red line disappear, isn't it? If that happened in medical situations, it'd be a bit frightening. And we can see that the difference we've now, are things of, how are we going? Okay, so we've had a complete swap around on the responses to that one. We've now decided government direction is unhelpful. But I think, in fairness to the government representatives, that there is a point at which government help does work out and does work better. But we've seen initiatives coming from the universities themselves that are enough to drive key situations forward in certain contexts. Okay, thank you very much. And now for the final question a second time. Do you have to be entrepreneurial in order to actually teach it? And can you answer that question now, please? Okay, yeah. All right, well, that's reaffirmed your initial view then, that initially, yes, it's very important to be entrepreneurial or you can't teach it, and that's even more emphasized now when you've heard some great examples from our panel on how that will work, again, with ministry support or directed from the university itself. That's been a very excellent debate. I mean, and we've had, before I thank the speakers, just to remind you that we've not only covered the perspectives from the ministry and from the engineering faculty in the university, but your questions have led us into issues of IP, they've led us into the issues of linking the companies with the institutions, with the education system, and have led us into looking at the business of recognition for academics. Huge issues and very, very important and excellent questions for the panel, which they've done very well to respond to from here. Just before thanking the panel, I'm sure you will do that with me, I would like to make another couple of quotations, if I may. One from Jim Robin, a renowned engineer, who said, "Formal education will make you a living, but self-education will make you a fortune." And I think those people who have developed themselves will always be in that position. And a final quotation, which I've always looked for an excuse to give this quotation, so I'm going to use it here, which is from Groucho Marx, who said, "The secret of life is honesty and fair dealing. And if you can fake that, you'll get away with anything." So I'd like to, with you, to thank the panel for their excellent contributions this afternoon. And on your behalf, many thanks to all of you. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. No, you did a great presentation. I'm based in London at the moment. We have a very strong faculty of engineering. I think that's characteristic, yeah. So that is me. I'm based in London at the moment. Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Very interesting presentation. Thank you.